Let's do it. All right. Welcome, man. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Today's topic is why is it so hard to change your behaviors in marriage? And when your marriage is in trouble, deep down you know that there are changes that have to be made. You can sense that some of your behaviors have not been kind of aligned to the man, husband, and father you've always wanted to be, somebody who you'd be proud of, right? Some of the behaviors you have, the ones you've been demonstrating to your family, friends, and everybody else, some of them you're clearly not proud of, and you don't want to be displaying that. And I know this because why else would a husband start to do things specifically within marriage, right? On his own to try to fix his marriage. I mean, yes, there's the awakening that kind of takes place, that things are really really bad, right, in the marriage. Um, this is specifically when the wife, has given you the slap, and you realize, okay, like this is serious stuff now. Something really has to shift. I get that the way my wife signaled me this time, aka the slap, like she's not joking. That's something's got to shift. So that is definitely a motivator. But if the husband didn't actually feel that he had some actual responsibility in all of this, then why would he go into overcompensation mode, right? With pleasing and trying to fix everything. So there is some motivation there. There is something that's going on there where the man sees something about himself that has to alter, even if he's not truly admitting it yet. And think about it. If you didn't care about your wife and you really thought everything you have done so far was perfect, like there's nothing in your behaviors that need to change, why would you care if your wife gave you the slap? Like you probably just wouldn't care, right? Well, what this leads to is that husbands attempt to change their behaviors like fairly quickly, but then they realize it's not as easy thing to do as one thinks, right? They realize that pleasing takes over, and they are trying to manipulate their wife back into the marriage using these pleasing behaviors. So in today's live, we want to kind of go over the key reasons why this is so challenging, and also give you resources to address them. Because we understand that what you'll hear today may be overwhelming, and further guidance will be needed to make sure that the concepts that are shared today are kind of actionable. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? Can you take action? Can you take action on what you have heard, what you have learned? Because if you cannot, then nothing's going to change. So, in addition to the usual 8 free resources that we'll give away to you, that are valued over $1,000, we're also going to do something different this week, which is a Q&A at the end of the live. Okay, so instead of after this big topic, we're not going to go into other smaller topics, but we're going to actually go into Q&A. And the way that's going to look like is we'll open it up for Q&A, and you can start putting some questions in the chat, and we'll actually address them live. Okay. In terms of the 8 free resources, you'll be getting a 330-page hard copy book free. Just pay for shipping. It comes with 4 trainings. There's going to be a template. We're going to be giving away an email mentorship program, as well as 1 hour of coaching. Okay, in addition to this, plus this Q&A. Okay, so make sure that you're present, you're paying attention, so that you can have questions ready for us at the end of this section. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started with the first of the 6 reasons why it is so hard to change your behaviors in marriage. Okay, so first one will be willpower. All right, so willpower is the ability to stay in control of yourself. Willpower is a very important part of your everyday life, not just marriage, but everyday life. Okay, however, there are problems with it that you kind of need to be aware of. You need to consider them, especially within the context of changing your behaviors and rebuilding your marriage. All right, willpower, typically it's highest in the morning. when you wake up, when you're all fresh. And it is lowest at night. Okay? When you have a good night's sleep, or even any type of sleep, okay, for that matter, as long as you had some sleep, your willpower will get rebooted. It'll get refreshed, replenished, re-energized, filled back up again. Okay? As you go through your day making decisions and encountering situations at work, problems to be solved at home or with friends or colleagues or your kids, your willpower will slowly start to dwindle down. Okay? By nighttime, in most cases, you are totally exhausted, and there's not much left of it as it relates to your willpower. Okay? Now, what this tells you about your willpower is that it's finite. It runs out unless replenished. Okay? Now, there's different ways of replenishing it. Obviously, one we talked about is sleep. Okay? Another one that has a direct correlation is confidence. Willpower has a direct correlation with your confidence as well as your emotional stability. So the higher your confidence, the higher your willpower bucket, if you will. Let's call it a bucket, your willpower bucket, right? It's kind of like the bigger your confidence, the bigger the bucket, which is holding your willpower, so you can fill it up more. And the longer, obviously, that it takes for it to kind of run out. So most husbands are trying to alter their behaviors using willpower. Okay, but even when you have kind of mastered the ability to replenish your willpower, whether because you become really good at sleeping, you meditate, you increase your confidence, new behaviors, they don't tend to stick around long enough when it's done through willpower, because there's something happening along the way, for sure, that can kind of crush your willpower and have you fall back into the old behaviors. So using sheer willpower to alter your behaviors is not the best approach. Okay? Willpower will be needed. It is important in the process. However, relying solely on willpower, it will not change your behaviors long term.
Yeah, it's not going to change them long term. And the other important part of that as well is just to highlight to men that their willpower is tested differently depending on the scenario, right? So a man who's trying to lose weight, for example, it may not take a whole lot of willpower for him to resist eating that chocolate bar. But how much willpower is it going to take for him to control himself when his bullets are firing and his wife is just telling him, she regrets marrying him? So the amount of willpower needed to control yourself, is dependent on the situation, and how you react to the situation is dependent on a number of factors, such as how triggered you are in that situation. So as I said, I'm just highlighting that because the degree that your willpower is eroded, it's not like for like, right? So
Yeah.
different situations, you will respond to them differently. And for you to control yourself in those situations, if you're relying on willpower, it's going to take varying degrees of willpower to do it.
Yeah. 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 And it's a nice lead into to the next section, as you talked about some of the triggers, which is need for validation and certainty from your wife. Um, I mean, let's be realistic. The biggest motivator for husbands in change, like to change their behaviors, is their wife's slap, right? And naturally, that also becomes the standard along which the success kind of evaluated upon. Okay, so the effect of your wife's slap is such that it actually has you wake up, right? It forces you to look internally and really look at yourself and how you are showing up, right? The things your wife has brought up to your attention, about your behaviors, all of a sudden become very real, and you're now taking it seriously. You're at a point where you are ready to change your behaviors, and because you have taken what your wife said at face value and very seriously, you kind of go ahead and start doing the changes, but they're all directly changes that were highlighted to you by her, right? Wash the dishes, do the laundry, be with the kids more, take out the garbage, right? The list goes on. And of course, you muster up your willpower to do all those things that she has been asking for you to do even before. In fact, you probably did them before at times as well, just to get things back on track. And it's been a repetitive cycle. Okay. But at the end of the day, you are just kind of trying to impress her, right? The reason for your need to impress her is simply because you want her validation that everything is okay, things will continue as before, right? So you want to know that your actions are what she wants and that they are what's needed for your wife to actually stay with you, or for things to continue, things to get back to the way they were before she gave you the slap. Okay. And because she has complained in the past about these, it makes sense that those are the ones that you're going to address and focus on, right? But then time goes by and it's like, hey, like, where's the validation? Why is it not coming? Right? I am doing all these things she wanted me to do. So how is it that she's not validating my actions if those are the things that she's asked for? Like, that makes no sense. What's going on? Right? And it has you kind of, fuming, because not only she's not validating, but she's becoming more bitchy and, piling stuff on top of the to-do list. So from the outside, it looks like things are not really looking better. So your willpower, as at that point, is running out, right? You are at a point of saying, enough is enough, and boom, you give up and you get back to your old behaviors.
And back to your old behaviors, and actually see this as one of the most dangerous areas of failure for a man. And here's why I say that. So let's imagine his wife does fall for all that extra effort. She sees you ticking those boxes, arriving home earlier from work, you're spending time with the kids, all those things, as you said, that she wanted you to do, right? Like, life is great. Happy wife, happy life. Like, that's what they say, right? But no. And your wife will not always be happy. And if your attempt at becoming a better husband is to do more around the house or spending more time with the kids, you're not actually preparing yourself for the days when she's not happy, for those days when she is annoyed about something at work or something you did. So doing more laundry is not what she needs in those moments. And unless you've learned what she needs and become the man that's capable of giving that to her, well, then you will always fall short. So that's why I wanted to highlight, this is such a dangerous area for men to purely think, oh, all I need to do is do more stuff around the place. That's not it.
Yeah, and it's funny because most men who've done TBH and actually gone through the program, they start to realize that all these to-do stuff, these more stuff, they actually become less. And the things that they do more of is what more represents them as a man, father, and husband. So it's just crazy how typically it shifts back and life becomes easier, even though it looks like from the outside you're doing all these things, but life is becoming easier. It becomes less of a chore. Yeah. Now, another aspect that's fueled by some aspect of trigger here is your need for your wife to reciprocate your efforts. Okay, I don't know if you've heard of the saying "quid pro quo." It's Latin for something given or received for something else. In other words, eye for an eye, or I do this and in return you do that, right? If I give you this, you give me that, right? This reciprocity with this quote is a feature of marriage as well, obviously, right? And for most husbands, changing behaviors becomes a problem when their wife doesn't reciprocate something in return, right? Marriage is a commitment to being of service to your partner, right? And being of service doesn't have strings attached, right? If you expect something in return, you are no longer in service of your wife. If you are changing your behaviors in marriage because you are expecting your wife to provide something in return, like validation, like certainty, like approval, like sex, well, then you are no longer genuinely in service. You are trying to change your behaviors for the wrong reasons, right? Changes of behaviors simply because becomes a tool to kind of manipulate your wife back to you so that you feel better about yourself, right? The changes are not because you see that the way you have been, living your life is not one that you're proud of, or one that you want your kids to live by. It is simply to ensure that you have some level of certainty that she will come back. Now, when you base your changes on reciprocity in marriage, it will be very short-lived, right? Because there comes a point when you realize that she's not reciprocating, and you can start to doubt your actions. Okay, you will start doubting it, if it's worth doing it. All this effort that you're putting in, right? You're putting in all the effort when she's not giving anything back to you, even though you have been doing it for weeks or months. And at that point, right, when you come to that realization, because you're holding that context and coming from that place, at that point you may crack and say, you know what, I am done, and I revert back to the old behaviors automatically because it was easier.
Yeah, which in itself will come from a bullet, right? They'll dip into, hey, this isn't fair. I'm doing all this effort, and I'm not getting anything in return. And listen, I'm not going to claim to be a scholar of Latin, so I'm just going to go with your quotation, right? So it's something given or received for something else. And the default for a lot of people is to think that means, if I give Andre something, you're going to give me something in return.
Yeah.
But what if men started to relate to it as, hey, if I give my best, I will get something like pride, for example, in return. What if I do all this work on myself and I get a bulletproof life in return? Because that allows you to control one thing, everything in relation to you. So you can actually move away from, hey, what is she doing and what am I getting back from her, versus, hey, what am I getting as a result of becoming a better man, becoming a better husband, becoming a better father in my life? So that it's just a mind shift on the exact same quotation, but internalizing it. So yeah, you give your best, you will get something in return that you can control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the control part is such a key thing, right? Because now your actions are geared towards something where the result is controlled, where now you can be in control of the end result versus relying on your wife for all of those things. And this kind of sums it up on the trigger side. We're going to have 3 more that we're going to go through, this being the next one. But overall lack of emotional, self-sufficiency, which is another challenge why behaviors are so hard to change and maintain in marriage. And really, this is triggers, right? A husband has to become emotionally self-sufficient in life and marriage in order to have it function well and for him to be truly free and happy. But what does that actually mean, right? What does emotional self-sufficiency mean? And I guess I would say it's a state of being where a husband is fully in control of his emotions, not through willpower, but through his natural way of being, which means that his actions are not controlled by how he feels. He can separate his emotions and his commitments and how those two align with his actions, right? In this state, a husband doesn't need to use willpower because he has dealt with the insecurities. He has pulled his bullets, which used to cause him to get triggered. See, triggers happen because somebody says or does something, or something happens and it hurts you, right? It hurts you. And it hurts you because you have been hurt in the past like that, most likely as a child. And over your development into adulthood, you have created several survival behaviors because of those triggers. And those survival behaviors are meant to protect you from feeling that hurt ever again, right? So kind of to put it together, when you have bullets, in other words, insecurities, you haven't dealt with them. And dealing with bullets means you're letting go of suppressed hurt, all right? So when you have not dealt with your bullets, when you have not let go of suppressed hurts of various bullets, right? And your wife says or does something that triggers your bullet, you will start to behave in ways that you don't want to. And the reason for that is because there's an automation that kicks in, your survival behavior kicks in, trying to protect you. And you'll start to do things that you're not proud of. And the way this relates to changing behaviors is that your wife will test your changes anytime she sees them. So here you are in the marriage. She has given you the slap. You are now very serious about changing some of your behaviors. You go ahead and attempt to change the behaviors, but your wife is not going to believe those changes. She will question them. She will doubt them, which makes sense. You would too, probably, right? You've trained her to expect a certain behavior from you for so many years. Just because you've done it for a couple of weeks, that doesn't mean she believes it. So she'll test you, right? Now, if you are not emotionally self-sufficient and you start to implement these changes, when she tests you on those changes, you will get triggered and react to them, and you will fail her test. Okay? And your wife's tests are designed exactly to do that, to have you fail. How else would it be a legit test to see if these changes are real or bullshit, right? And when you fail her tests enough times, you'll want to give up, and especially if you don't understand this concept. And this includes the changes in behavior, which will have you, again, revert back to the old you.
And you touched on it there with respect to, she's seen your changes before, right? She's seen you also failing to maintain those changes before.
Yeah.
Right? She's now at the stage, after a few years of trying to save the marriage herself, trying to give you the signs, ultimately getting to the place where she has to give you the slap. So she's already checked out. She's emotionally checked out. She's physically checked out. And you failing her test just reinforces her decision. Like, it validates her decision. So unless you're willing to make that shift towards being self-sufficient, to being emotionally reliable for yourself, well, then you're never going to be able to be that for her. And that is one of the key areas, emotional safety and security, that's so important for her.
Now, what happens if, let's say, you do master willpower, you're able to boost it all up, right? You're emotionally self-sufficient. You don't need reciprocity from your wife. You don't need her validation, right? So let's assume you have conquered all of that, right? Conquered willpower, become emotionally self-sufficient, no longer need her validation, reciprocity. Does that mean you're good? Well, sort of. Short term, yes, you're very well set up. And long term, one of the other critical items we have to look at is replacing your old habits, right? So lack of new habits. Most of our behaviors are habitual, and habits, take years to form. I'm sure you've heard the saying, right? Thousands of times you have to do something again and again to make it a habit, or spend X number of hours, right? So that means you have been doing some of these certain habits for decades, right? Some of these that you're trying to change. So when you have dealt with the emotional trigger side of these habitual behaviors, and you are no longer, doing them, they must be replaced with some other new behavior that is more positive to you, your marriage, your life, your kids, right? And this is important because if you fail to replace the old behavior with a new one that is constructive, then anytime new situations arise that you haven't actually experienced before, it could kick you back into the old habit. So let me explain this. You have gone through, let's say, 30 years of your life or 40 years of your life, and there's certain situations that you've experienced, and your bullets, your insecurities, and how you react also experience those situations. And there are situations you have not experienced yet. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm 25 years old. I've dealt with all my bullets, but I've never had anybody pass away that's really close to me. And somebody passes away. And I haven't replaced my behaviors, my old behaviors, with new ones. Now, when I'm experiencing this new phenomenon and the feelings that come with somebody passing away that's close to me, I could revert back to the old behaviors unless I've replaced them with new ones and have made those the new automatic, which are more positive to myself, to my family, and so forth, right? And you could play this out if you're 35 years old, 45 years old, 55, 65, right? There are things that we, obviously, the older we get, the less the probability that we'll experience something that we've never experienced before, but it's still possible. And when you're trying to work on your marriage, which on average is typically between, ages of 30 to 55, a lot of new things that can come in your way, right? So for certain situations that you have experienced, this may not be the case, but new ones, yes.
Yeah, and just going back to your example, a man may have dealt with a bullet of being abandoned by a loved one when, they're in junior school or 5 years old, and the mom forgot to pick them up, or the mom was delayed picking them up, and they had that sense of abandonment from someone that they love, and they deal with it through dealing with the emotional trauma and damage associated with that. And yes, later in life, a loved one, could be their mom, could be, an uncle, a relative, dies. So the scenario is different, but it is actually a great avenue to see, hey, does that same sense of being abandoned by someone I love actually turn up? Right? So it'll help them to see, hey, how much of that bullet, how much of that insecurity have I actually dealt with? And it's not that habits take years to form, but I think they occur habitually over decades, and they're reinforced and mastered over years. It's the same as bullets and insecurities, right? The bullet and insecurities of being abandoned by someone you love as a 5-year-old, situations in life and experiences in life just reinforce that habit until it's dealt with. It reinforces that emotional insecurity until, as we speak about, a man deals with the emotional component of that. And, the situation is different. And I think that's important to recognize, that it's not just a wife that can create those scenarios and create those tests to see how your progress is going. The tests are available in the entirety of your life. I just hate when somebody cut me off at traffic lights. Okay, what was that about? Was it that sense of being bullied? Was it, back to the playground in school again? Was it a sense of, oh, that's not fair. Why is that person's time more valuable than my time? So you start paying attention to stuff that you previously get annoyed by, get triggered by, and hey, how reliable am I now? How have my habits changed? Because I'm fundamentally changed. If a man goes through everything that we spoke about above, he is fundamentally different. He will not have the same reaction because he has done the degree of work that he has done. Mm-hmm. So he becomes more reliable around his emotional self-sufficiency. Right? So you start to look at, hey, am I living by my terms without compromise? All of those things, as I said, they can be independent of a man's wife, but they're great avenues to see, hey, what are the new habits? your habits are reactions in many cases, right? The man choosing not to eat the chocolate is a reaction to a scenario previously that he would have eaten the chocolate. Right? So developing new habits, and you pay attention to, hey, what are my response habits now looking like versus when I wasn't emotionally self-sufficient?
Yeah, very well said. Yeah. Okay, let's bring all of this kind of together, right? Um, I mean, this boils down to this, right? The fundamental reason why husbands have a hard time changing their behaviors in marriage is because they're doing it for all the wrong reasons. Okay, um, have you like have you ever had the situation where you were so motivated to do something or to get something done where like it wasn't even a question if you're going to get it done, like it was already done. It was, you just had to take the steps. Like you'll figure out the how and what the steps are and everything, but in your head, like it was done. There was no question about it. I know for me, one of them was when I decided that I want to make a bigger difference and I want to quit the corporate world and I want to have my own business and I want to be able to make significant difference within that. Like the motivation, like it was amazing because my actions just came. Just I asked for the help I needed. I reached out to who I needed to. I read the books I needed to read. I researched what I needed to, and then I executed and implemented whatever I needed to, and it was just happening, right? Because in my head, it wasn't even a question why I'm doing it or if it can be done. It was just like, okay, boom, it's gonna get done. So I've experienced that kind of motivation, and I'm sure you have as well at some point in your life, whether you were, young adult or a child or in your adult life, or maybe all of them, right? Well, with marriage problems, husbands don't usually have this kind of a motivation. Right? One aspect of that has to do with the fact that husbands want to change their behaviors for the wrong reasons. Wrong reasons means here that the motivation is to change the behavior. Like it's just not strong enough. The push to see it through, to go through a permanent change it's not strong enough, right? It means that when hiccups happen along the way, the weak motivation or the reason will not hold you actually on the path of consistency toward keeping the changed behavior. Right? Because you're probably wanting to change because you want your wife back. So everything you are doing is with that purpose in mind. Right? I will do whatever it takes to get my wife back. And that becomes your sole motivator, your sole reason to change. And also your standard, your measuring stick. And when things happen along the way that doesn't validate that you are on the right path, like your wife doesn't acknowledge your changes, then you simply give up.
Yeah, you give up, and I'm kind of smiling in my head. I will do whatever it takes to get my wife back. And I go back to, I think it was Mike Tyson, that everybody has a plan until they get a punch in the face, right? And again, there were challenges in this program. There are challenges with respect to the Bulletproof Husband. It's not plain sailing. It's not an ABC pop-up book. It actually takes work, and it takes hard work to become the man that's capable of saving his marriage. It's attainable. It's very attainable. We're thousands of men that have managed to achieve it. And I think at some point within a man's journey within TBH, he moves away from the word motivation and he steps into an arena of ownership. He steps into, and there is a big difference. Ownership relates to how invested am I in doing the work to achieve a certain outcome. Am I willing to do the work? Am I willing to bring my best? Am I willing to actually increase the level of my ability so that I'm consistently and continuously getting better and better and getting more able to be the man I've always wanted to be? Setbacks happen, life happens, unforeseen circumstances happen. But in my world, ownership adapts, and it actually allows you to rise above all of that. Because motivation is a challenge. But as I said, there is a key point for every man within TBH where they move away from that motivation and step into, because they have the ability to step into ownership.
Yeah, and once you have that ownership in place, you need the right actions to take. Like everything that we talked about is nice and dandy, but okay, like what now? What do you do now, right? So we're gonna head into the Q&A, but before we do that, we promised a bunch of resources. So I'm gonna give you 5 of the 8 resources that we promised, and then we're gonna start with the book, okay, which comes with 3 bonus trainings and a free template. So put book in the comments, and then John will send you a link, which once you fill out, again, the book is free. It's a hard copy book. You'll have to pay for shipping. We're talking between $5 and $15, depending on your location around the world where you're listening from. And we also get that the book takes some time to arrive. So we're putting in 3 bonus trainings, okay, which is a marriage stabilizer blueprint, a stages framework so that you get clear what are the stages to go through to rebuild your marriage, and domains framework, which is what are the areas where you need to become self-sufficient in, and what the path looks like towards that, along with Husband's 7 Pillars, which is a free template that gives you kind of guidance on a daily basis. It's kind of like your daily cheat sheet, okay? So put book in the comments, and then John will give you that link, okay? Now, in the meanwhile, what we'll do is we'll get into Q&A. So what we want you to do is put some questions in the comments that you may have, whether it's regarding today's topic or stuff that's going on in your marriage. Try to be as concise as possible, right? Don't write a novel. Put it in question format, and then we'll ask more questions if needed. And the idea is that we'll give you some more deeper guidance and coaching around that, okay? And I'll pop your question up here at the on the screen once you've put that in. So we'll wait a couple minutes here to see who has some questions. It is a first of its kind. Typically we do more topics, but we thought we'd give this a go and see if there's a demand for some more deeper coaching. I see, Zach, you won the book, so we'll put that in.
Yes, done.
You got it? Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. All right, questions. Let's see. Who's got some questions?
Otherwise, we're going to have to sing.
I know. Hundreds of men pay big money for this resource to hear us answer questions, so I take advantage of that. How do you get self-sufficient? Okay, great question. So I believe I can show this. Yes, there you go. Boom. Sorry for putting you on the spot there. How do you get self-sufficient? So when we're talking about self-sufficiency, I'm going to focus on emotional self-sufficiency first and foremost, okay? Because when you get emotionally self-sufficient, that will allow you to fuel all the other self-sufficiencies. And other self-sufficiencies, we're looking at financial self-sufficiency, mental self-sufficiency, spiritual self-sufficiency, physical self-sufficiency, right? Physical self-sufficiency obviously has to do with going to the gym and making sure that you're physically taking care of yourself and everyone. Financial, another obvious one, right? Making sure your finances are in order. Now, if we look at spiritual, then your belief systems. However, all of this don't work well and hard to achieve unless you actually achieve emotional self-sufficiency. And emotional self-sufficiency has to do with the degree of control that you have over yourself and actions. How easily triggerable are you? Are you able to make decisions without taking guidance from your emotions? If you made a commitment to something or somebody, are you able to keep that commitment even though you may not feel like doing it, right? So these are aspects of or demonstrations of being self-sufficient. If your wife is telling you something, are you able to listen without justifying, without interrupting her, without making a big deal of what she's saying or taking it personally, right? This goes for your kids. Are your kids triggering you? So achieving a state of emotional self-sufficiency essentially allows you to live your life in a way where you're not getting triggered, okay? If you are not getting triggered, that means you have dealt with your insecurities, because triggers come from your insecurities, what we call bullets, okay? Now, what are insecurities? Insecurities are suppressed hurts. Most of your suppressed hurts will come from childhood. So we're talking 5 to 80 years old. This is when you start to experience failure for the first time, the notion of failure, what it feels like to fail somebody or yourself. And then 11 to 13, where the sense of belonging starts to develop, right? You're entering puberty. Who are your friends and who you associate with becomes very important. And you need to be able to manage that somehow. But there are failures that come with that. There's challenges that come with that. So between ages of 5 to 8 and 11 to 13 is where most of your deeper bullets, that's when you get them, okay? Based on the challenges that you experience in that age group. And what happens is, let's go through an example, okay? You're 70 years old, you're standing in class, the teacher asks you to get up, go in front of the board, you're grade 2, and they ask you to write something on the board, and you totally mess it up. You don't know the answer, you mess it up, you make a fool of yourself, everybody's laughing at you, teacher calls you silly and stupid, okay? So you internalize that. That hurts. And you make it mean something about yourself. And the thing is that as a child, you're not really capable of blaming the classmates who are laughing at you or blaming the teacher. Where you go is blaming yourself, because the part of your brain that's responsible for blaming others is just not developed yet. So automatic go-to is self-blame. And in doing so, you label yourself. And in this case, the most happening label would be, I am stupid. I must be stupid, right? And so you label yourself as stupid. And the next thing you do is you start to create survival behaviors so that when other situations in the future happen that is similar to this, you can use those survival behaviors to get out of it. Great example of survival behavior for stupid bullet would be over-explaining. You over-explain everything to everybody to make sure that they understand it the way that you intended it to be understood, so that they don't think you're stupid. And the more you explain, the more angles you talk it over from, the higher the probability in your head that they'll understand it really well and they won't conclude that you are stupid. Okay? Another symptom of stupid bullet is a lot of degrees, a lot of acronyms beside your name, right? People who have the stupid bullet, they tend to be actually very smart because they overcompensate by learning so that they can hide behind the fact that they're smart and they don't need to, nobody can ever figure it out. The smarter you are, the more you know, the less probability that somebody will figure out that you're stupid. So you go through life with these, and at the end of the day, the truth is, you still think you're stupid. Internally, you're very smart. It's very clear to everybody. But internally, that trauma is still there. That suppressed hurt from when you were 70 years old, grade 2 in front of the class, being laughed at and called stupid, that's still there. and then other situations piling on top of that. So to answer your question, how do you get self-sufficient emotionally, is by getting rid of that suppressed hurt. And that's an emotional process. When you were in front of the class and everybody laughed at you and you had those, interpretations that you had, you didn't think your way into that. You felt your way into that. It hurt right away. Right? So it's really critical that you remove the suppressed hurt as part of the process, because when you remove the suppressed hurt, then you remove all the triggers that come with that. Once you actually done the emotional work to get rid of the suppressed hurt, you've grieved it out, nobody can say, including your wife, or do stuff that will have you, that will make you feel stupid. And the things that used to trigger you, that would have you go into ultra education mode, or interrupting, or justifying, or over explaining, right? Or having the need to be right. These are all symptoms of stupid bullet. They go away. You won't have the urge to do those things. John, anything you want to add?
No, other than Zach's question, just because it's related to this, should be the next component that we address.
Okay, let's see that one. In releasing suppressed emotion, do you have any suggestions for initiating that process? I have tried some, but found myself getting either lost in the emotion or overwhelmed in direction. Yeah, it's probably one of the hardest things to master, because we're raised in a way where boys don't cry, and you gotta look good, you gotta look your best all the time. There's just no space to feel and to engage those feelings. So write in the chat, Zach, what is the last thing that you can remember that pissed you off?
Yeah, and just while he's doing that, the other component of what makes it difficult is there's bullets at play, right? Like you touched on it with respect to, we're raised to suppress emotions. We're raised to, hey, that didn't hurt. I'm stronger than that. And the manifestation when you're a kid that something hurt or didn't hurt is whether you cry or not. Right? So we tend to, it's built in over time. We were talking about it earlier with respect to habits, and habits being developed and reinforced over time. Like not crying is one of the huge ones in relation to how boys are raised and men operate. So.
Come on, Zach, waiting for you. What's like the last thing that pissed you off? Anything that got you like triggered. You must have something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to us, and you wouldn't have marriage challenges if nothing triggered you. Okay, Zach is not putting anything in. So anybody else, put something in, and I'll help answer Zach's question through an example. So tell me one thing that any of you got triggered about lately. What's something that triggered you? Something your wife said, something your wife did. And just keeping it in the context of marriage. Nobody has anything that gotten them triggered?
This is starting to piss me off. I'm kidding.
Criticism from my father, Mike Winger said. Okay, but be specific. What did your father criticize you? Okay, great. Quinston. Okay, my wife. So
is always
my wife
out.
Complaining that I don't communicate well. Okay, and so I'm going to go back to Zach's question. So my wife's complaining that I don't communicate well. Okay, so when your wife says that, it hurts you, and the label that you have given yourself starts to go to work. And because it hurts you, there's certain behaviors you start to execute as a result of that. And a lot of the behaviors, or very common behavior that men would execute in this case, is avoidance. They try to restrict communication with the wife because they have been told that they're not good at that. But the hurt that you experience, the key to doing emotional work is that the hurt that you experience, you actually confront it instead of trying to avoid it. Your survival behavior forces you to not look at the hurt, to not feel the hurt. It's trying to protect you. It's kind of like bodyguards at a club, right? A bouncer at a club lets you in the club, or they don't let you in the club. Okay, so anger, which is a defense mechanism a lot of the times against this hurt, right? Because when your wife criticizes you and tells you don't communicate well, it's frustrating and it gets you angry. And oftentimes it might lead to arguments, and you might try to convince her that you are good at communication, or you might ask, well, why am I not good in communication? What can I do better? And she's not answering you. And then that gets you frustrated, right? There's a lot of frustration and anger. So you want to be able to be in a private place when you actually do emotional work, and you want to lead with letting out the anger, the frustration, because until you do that, you won't have access to the hurt. Anger's purpose is to protect access to suppressed hurt. It's a protective emotion, and it fuels a lot of the survival behaviors. So one way to do that is, Quinston, let's say you go to your garage, 5-6 hours have gone by since your wife criticized you. You go to your garage and you replay your wife criticizing you. And you can even go back to other times when she criticized you around communication that may have been more potent or that rile you up more. And you actually want to be able to feel the frustration and the anger around that. And you want to express it. You want to go deep. You want that anger to take over you. That's why you're in a private place, so that you're able to actually do it in a way where it's safe, right? You can't do this at the gym, right? Because people are around and you just won't go as free with your emotions. And you'll emote it. I'll give you an example. I have a kickboxing bag in my garage. So whenever I'm doing emotional work and I feel anger, I put it out on the bag, okay? The key thing is you want to feel the anger and then emote it. You don't just want to do the work on the bag thinking you'll get angry or that you'll let anger out. You want to sit with yourself and actually feel the anger and frustration that your wife may be causing, or colleagues at work may be causing, or whatever the reason is, your kids, that has you do the emotional work. And when you've emoted all of the anger out of your system, it will give you access to hurt, to suppressed hurt. And that has to be emoted as well. And the way that looks like is actually letting it all out. You're actually grieving it out like a 5-year-old, right? Snot all over your face, crying, sobbing, whatever that may look like. Okay, but it's actually the 5-year-old's suppressed hurt that you're letting out is just coming out of an adult's body. This gives you permanent change. You do this consistently around your insecurities and you get rid of them. What will happen is you'll start to notice a higher level of confidence. You'll start to see that things your wife or kids are saying triggering you less. You'll feel lighter, okay? And you'll start to notice other people who have the same insecurity, and it's going to become very clear to you that they're behaving certain ways that you used to behave, and you're going to be able to see your old self in them. John, anything you want to add?
And again, it's no different to training a muscle. And I think men need to, you touched on it earlier. It's one of the most challenging components of the program because of all those habits, all the upbringing, all the just the shame and embarrassment often associated with expressing emotions. So it takes time to develop that emotion. It takes time to develop that capability and that muscle to actually do emotional work. So, but every time you attempt it, irrespective of how far into it you go, you're chipping away. Like the consistency is what's important. Consistency of, okay, I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to go try and do some emotional work, or I'm going to try and tap back into what was it that annoyed me 5 hours ago when I was with my wife in the car and the kids were screaming in the back. But it's making that effort, it's making that consistent effort, and recognizing, okay, it's going to take some effort, it's going to take some time. It is a new muscle that I'm trying to develop. No different to if you just started a bench press in the gym. You're not going in there and doing 1,000 pounds. Like, you just wouldn't do it, right?
Yep.
You start even with no weights on the bar, most likely, just to, hey, I just need to get my routine correct, my form correct. And it's no different when trying to train this muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. Zach, so this was an answer to your question, but because you're at work, Quenston gave me the example to go with. Okay. Now I think next one should be Luke. Luke's that's another good one here. So Luke's
There's a
question
couple of
is,
early ones as well. Yeah.
oh yeah, okay. We'll go through a couple more. What if you lashed out at your wife and kids because you shut down because of emotional trauma? Yeah, that's a great example of I call this the pressure cooker experience, right? So we actually made a video on this a while back. So essentially, what that is you're a pressure cooker, and every time something happens that triggers you, you're suppressing the trigger. You have the initial trigger from way back in childhood, and then all the stuff piling up in life, situations that have happened in the past. You gets pushed down, gets pushed down, gets pushed down. And like a pressure cooker, at some point, the pressure inside you will be so much that you'll start to whistle like a pressure cooker. Okay? One of the ways that whistle could look like is I lash out at my kids and my wife. Okay? One common reason why husbands lash out is because they have a weak bullet. A weak bullet means that something happened in their life when they were a kid where they concluded and labeled themselves as weak. Now, one of the survival behaviors of somebody who has a weak bullet is to do everything to make you look the opposite, which is control. Make you look strong. Control, being in control, is one way to have you feel strong about yourself. Okay? So when you feel like the situation is at a loss, you try to gain back control. One of the reactive ways to do that is to lash out, thinking that you'll gain control back. Okay? Because you overpower everybody. You're the loudest. You're the most aggressive. So it has you feel in the moment when the survival behavior kicks in that you're in control, which means that you're strong. So it hides your weak bullet, right? You don't feel weak anymore because you're out there, if that makes sense. So that's one example where it can come from. Now, ultimately, where you want to go is you want to actually take out, like I do, for example, you want to take out that frustration, but alone, let's say at the gym bag, right? And you want to let all that frustration and anger out. And then have the ability to have access to that hurt. And here's the thing, the hurt will come. There's no thinking about it. You just have to surrender to it, and the hurt will come. And when the hurt comes and you let it all out, at the end of it, there will be some sort of personal truth to you. Okay? So for example, one of the reasons why somebody could feel weak is because when they were young, their father beat them, or their father beat their mother, and the child could not do anything about it. And he concluded about himself that he was too weak to help his mom, or to help himself, or to help his brother or sister. So now he grows up overcompensating to be strong throughout his life, so that he never has to feel that pain, that hurt of what it feels like to be weak, right? But you've got to face it. You've got to let that out. And simple truths will come to you at the end of an exercise like this. Oh, it wasn't my fault. My father did the best he could with the tools that he had. And my father had all these bullets that had him behave this way. But it had nothing to do with me being weak or not weak. My father was just limited in how he could parent, and this was the best he could do with what he had available. That's a simple truth that could be derived. But then you feel it with every ounce of your body. It's not like you
It's not a logical. It's not
exactly.
based on logic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The clarity comes as a result of the emotional work done. And just a couple of things on with respect to going at the gym bag. If you're in a gym, it's probably not going to lead this. It will not lead the same results as going at a gym bag in the privacy of your own garage, or going at a tree in the forest. Why? Because in a gym, you're going to be mindful of the people around you. It's going to distract you from actually connecting with your emotions. And the other thing, just for Luke or anyone, like, two things stand out for me in relation to your question. And one of it is around ownership. And start really looking at your questions and speaking from I, right? What if I lashed out at my wife and kids because I shut down because of emotional trauma? And the reason I'm highlighting that is just it actually gives you a greater sense of ownership. And I totally get it. You're putting it here in a, or asking for examples, etc. But really start to own the examples that you're giving. And what I also love about your question and what you've seen it is both of those components are associated to you. And it reinforces, hey, when you can actually control you, when you deal with your emotional trauma, when you deal with the fact that you lashed out, it's not the other people in your life that need to change. The other people will change because of the scenario. They will change because of your leadership. And that's why the work we do at Bulletproof Husband is so powerful, because we don't focus on anybody other than you, because you are the only person that can control you.
Okay, you go. Which question should we do next?
And let's go to Ollie G. I saw, was it Alice? We can do this one. Oh no, not that one. That's good to put up there for a few moments. It was earlier. Another one. Another question about daily routines. Oh, sorry, it was Mike.
Yeah. What sort of routines do you guys have built into your day that help you stay consistent? Okay, so there's two parts to that. The routines that we've put in place don't matter as much if the work prior to it hasn't been done. So this idea of being true to who you are as a man and being clear what your terms are, this idea of being able to prioritize your actions and stay committed to that, this idea of becoming emotionally self-sufficient and having removed most of your bullets. New bullets will come at you always. Life will throw stuff at you. For example, in the last 15 months, I've lost 4 people in my family, including my mother and my sister, right? Like, these are bullets that are just like huge. You've got to deal with them. They're something that I haven't experienced. I've never experienced what it's like to lose a mother, what it's like to lose a sister in my lifetime. So it doesn't matter what the work I've done is, these new experiences will highlight things about me and will have me learn things about myself that are critical to have me succeed and resolve this stuff, right? So my routine around emotional work is that I set aside a check-in with myself every week, once a week, where I ask myself, do I need any emotional clearing? Has stuff happened this week that I need to deal with, right? But for somebody who's brand new to emotional work, that's not going to work. For somebody who's brand new to emotional work, they're going to get on it on a daily basis. What I do once a week as a courtesy check-in with myself is a daily basis for others, or multiple times, right? Like, men at the Bulletproof Husband who are in our membership, a lot of them pull bullets every day until they get to a level where they've dealt with enough bullets. Then now they can start putting in maintenance structures in place. So basically what I'm trying to say is there's maintenance structures, and then there's stuff you need to do to get to the point where you can have some maintenance structure in place. If you are starting to rebuild your marriage, you're doing this work now, or even if you've been trying to rebuild your marriage, but this idea of emotional self-sufficiency and whatnot is new to you, like, you got to implement the tools that have proven to work consistently, and then you can start creating maintenance structures. Now, one thing that will work across the board, whether you're in maintenance phase or actually in the trenches, is healthy masculine relationships that are men who don't judge you. They get where you are at. They've been there. They know the same subject. They know the same tools. And they're willing to keep you accountable because they don't care about looking good in front of you. Okay? That is by far the most reliable and consistent structure that you can put in place, that you carry throughout your life once in place. Okay? There are other tools that you can put in place, and we talk a lot about these in our membership, but they're smaller snippets. The overarching one is accountability, outward accountability towards you, until you are able to keep yourself accountable. And this means having 2, 3, 4 men on speed dial that you can call, that you know will be there for you. You know they totally get where you are at. You know you can tell them anything you want. There's zero judgment, and they totally got your back. They'll get up in the middle of the night and go where you need to, go to do whatever you need to do, right? They're fully there for you. And then this is critical. It's to have these, you don't need a lot. You have 2 or 3 of these men, you're golden. Now we have hundreds of members in our membership, and so most men have dozens of these kind of relationships. But all you need is 2, 3, really. You have 2, 3 men like that, and they're keeping you accountable, and they have your best interest at heart. You're good. That's a solid. And then there's dozens of more accountability structures that we can talk about. But let's take this one away from this question. It's a huge one. Healthy masculine relationships. I don't know, John, you want to add something on, or there's any other that you see?
Yeah, I'm glad you differentiated the maintenance phase versus the establishing those habits and establishing those connections, because it is very different. And it's a bit like pushing a train. Like, what it takes to get the train moving is a lot more effort than keeping the train moving, right? So you're overcoming that friction, and it's the same in relation to some of the emotional work to get to that place where changing routines, changing habits, you're overcoming the equivalent of friction to get there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's really about stepping into solid, consistent, and reliable. And looking at, hey, what are the things that help me in my day, in my routine, to keep me in that place? And it can look different for people. For some people, it can be, hey, I'm going to go to church every morning, or I'm going to sit and read 30 minutes of the Bible every morning. For me, one of the big things is I go work out every morning. And I know it's not just about my fitness. It's about all of the other components that I need to have working in my life to create that space where I can go work out every morning, where I am reliable about going out working out every morning, irrespective of what I was doing the day before, what I was doing the night before. It's about building, as I said, that consistency into my life. Not for the external stuff, but for the internal stuff for me in relation to, hey, how reliable do I know myself to be? Right? How many excuses do I put in play for not doing something or doing something that I shouldn't have done? Mm-hmm. Right? So it really is about, as I said, stepping into ownership, stepping into responsibility, living from that place. And yeah, you figure out your routines that help you be at your best as much as possible. So,
Okay, let's do one more question. John, I'll let you pick
Let's
that. In
take.
the
I'm gonna
meanwhile, I
take
want to.
Jerry. I'm gonna take Jerry just because it was earlier in the chat. So
Okay.
let me.
And I want to put a few more resources out there for the men. I've given you 5 resources of the 8. Here's the other 3. So we have a training at the end of which you are able to book a free coaching call with one of our coaches. More than welcome to do that. So you do have to watch the training to get to the link, because the call goes much easier and way more value is provided when you've actually watched the training. And then there's also a free daily email mentorship, which is basically daily email I sent out with testimonials that help you contextually as well as content-wise in understanding how to show up, how to implement certain things, how to look at your wife, how to look at your marriage, and so forth. So if you want the call, just with the training, put in call in the chats. If you want the daily email mentorship, just put in daily into the chat, and then John will send those over to you. In the meanwhile, I'm going to go back to comments.
Go back to Jerry's. He might, for some
Jerry
reason,
DeLuca,
yeah, for some reason, it's not allowing me to show it.
this one,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
My wife and I have been separated a month, 2 children. She has changed tremendously in that time. As scary as that is, how can I show my understanding and express that this was all I wanted her to feel in our marriage? So, okay, it sounds like you wanted to separate and you wanted her to change. Can you provide a little bit of clarity as to who initiated the separation? And the question is, how can I show my understanding and express that this was all I wanted for her to feel in our marriage? Okay, so the biggest bang for your buck in being able to communicate with your wife are 2 things. Okay, there are communication tools which we're going to talk about, but there are 2 underlying things that will help you with this. Number 1, being emotionally self-sufficient, so there's no trigger. There's nothing your wife can say that will trigger you. Number 2, understanding the difference between the feminine and the masculine. If you understand attributes and character traits of the feminine, how it operates, and you are in a healthy masculine place yourself, where you are clear of what healthy masculinity looks like, you are clear who you are as a man and what that represents, right? You are clear that there's this concept of relationship triangle, which means that there's you, your wife, and the relationship, a separate entity. And you each provide to the relationship things. And she manages the relationship, which is part of the feminine, okay? Then you start to really see your wife and the marriage in a very different light. And things start to make sense, all right? And then once that's done, you can start to implement tools on top of that, like asking open-ended questions, like having your wife feel heard, understood, appreciated, and valued, okay? Having your wife feel heard means that she gets, that you get how she's feeling, right? Having your wife feel understood means that she gets, that you get what her commitment is behind how she's feeling, and so forth, okay? So there are tools you can implement around that, including like simple context shifts, like acknowledgement, knowing that acknowledging your wife is not the same as thinking you're like agreeing with her. A lot of men fail to acknowledge their wife because they believe if they acknowledge her, it's equivalent of them saying, I agree with you, when they don't. It's bullshit. You're just not doing it right. It's not. It's very important to acknowledge. Acknowledge your wife means that she gets that you get where she's at. You see the sky as blue, she sees it as purple. You acknowledging that your wife sees it as purple doesn't mean that you agree with her that the sky is purple. It just means that you understand that her seeing the sky as purple is okay, no judgment, and you get it that, okay, that's what she's seeing, right? The glasses she have on right now is having her see the sky as purple. It doesn't mean you agree with it. Things like that, right? Empathizing, hypothesizing around her feelings. So there's a lot of tools that you can put in, Jerry, to actually have her understand. But you need to be able to have the self-sufficiency in place, or at least be on the path to that, and also understand how the feminine works. Like, based on your question, or the prelude to your question, it sounds like you've been expecting your wife to change all along. And that tells me there's discrepancy in how you understand the feminine versus the masculine. That's something that you would look at, right? John,
Yeah, 100% with respect to the tools only become applicable after you've done the work with respect to yourself. Because you look at it, hey, we separated a month and she's changed tremendously in that time. But she's moved towards who in your head you wanted her to be and you wanted her to become. And she's done all of that in the space of a month, or she's made significant changes to being that in the space of a month while she was away from you. And that's a kick in the balls right there. But what you got to be willing to look at is, okay, what was I not providing? Because it wasn't enough for you to understand and express that's all you wanted for her. But why was she never able to experience that with you? Why did it take being separated from you for her to make those changes? Why did that environment become safer for her to have those changes happen? And that's where ownership comes in, Jerry. That's some of the hard reality that men face every day when they're working with us. It's, okay, I got to be responsible for that. I got to be responsible for, irrespective of how much I loved her and how much I wanted great things for her, I didn't create that for her. I didn't allow her to actually flourish within the relationship, and she stepped into flourishing outside the relationship. That doesn't mean she can't ever flourish within the relationship, because she can. Why? Because you're capable of changing. You're capable of changing your leadership. But it does start with you. It does start with, hey, what were your shortcomings? As much as you wanted it for her, that you weren't able to provide it for her.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. So yeah, let us know, please. Send it to support@bulletproofhusband.com, or let us know on the comments here if this Q&A was helpful. It's something that we just tried for the first time, and obviously we provided less content, less learning, and it was more of a balance of learning and then some questions. So let me know how it landed, if this worked, if something that you men would want to continue seeing. Yeah. In the meanwhile, I'm gonna quickly put up some of the other stuff that we've given out. Okay, so to get the free book with the bonus trainings and the free template, put book in the comments. And then to get the other two trainings, including the mentorship and the call training, put call or daily in the chat. Okay, do that now, or you can do it afterwards. Go to your YouTube channel or Facebook page, and you can do it there as well. Yeah, just want to make sure you have these resources available. Okay, they're valued well over $1,000. So just by having these resources plus this Q&A, I mean, yeah, you're getting a lot of really good stuff at no cost. All right, cool. Let's wrap it up. Same time, same place next week. And until then, have a fantastic weekend. Okay. Take care, man.
Over and out.